to a point at which they could no longer resist foreign aggression. They were absorbed by Persia, and Persia in the end was defeated by the Greeks. The Greeks perfected a new type of civilization that had been inaugurated by the Phoenicians, that of the city-state based on commerce and sea power. Greek cities differed greatly as regards the degree of individual liberty permitted to citizens. In most of them there was a great deal, but in Sparta an absolute minimum. Most of them tended, however, to fall under the sway of tyrants, and throughout considerable periods had a regime of despotism tempered by revolution. In a city-state, revolution was easy. Malcontents had only to traverse a few miles to get beyond the territory of the government against which they wished to rebel, and there were always hostile city-states ready to help them. Throughout the great age of Greece, there was a degree of anarchy which to a modern mind would seem intolerable. But the citizens of a Greek city, even those who were in rebellion against the actual government, had retained a psychology of primitive loyalty. They loved their own city with a devotion which was often unwise, but almost always passionate. The greatness of the Greeks in individual achievement was, I think, intimately bound up with their political incompetence. For the strength of individual passion was the source both of individual achievement and of the failure to secure Greek unity. And so Greece fell under the domination first of Macedonia, then of Rome. The Roman Empire, while it was expanding, left a very considerable degree of individual and local autonomy in the provinces. But after Augustus, government gradually acquired a greater and greater degree of control, and in the end, chiefly through the severity of taxation, caused the whole system to break down over the greater part of what had been the Roman Empire. In what remained, however, there was no relaxation of control. It was objection to this minute control, more than any other cause, that made Justinian's conquests so transitory. For those who had at first welcomed his legions as deliverers changed their minds when the legions were followed by an army of tax-gatherers. Rome's attempt to unify the civilized world came to grief largely because, perhaps through being both remote and alien, it failed to bring any measure of instinctive happiness even to prosperous citizens. In its last centuries, there was universal pessimism and lack of vigor. Men felt that life here on earth had little to offer, and this feeling helped Christianity to center men's thoughts on the world to come. With the eclipse of Rome, the West underwent a very complete transformation. Commerce almost ceased. The great Roman roads fell into disrepair. Petty kings constantly went to war with each other and governed small territories as best they could, while they had to meet the anarchy of a turbulent Teutonic aristocracy and the sullen dislike of the old Romanized population. Slavery on a large scale almost disappeared throughout Western Christendom, but was replaced by serfdom. In place of the vast fleets that brought grain from Africa to Rome, small communities, with few and rare external contacts, lived as best they could on the produce of their own land. Life was hard and rough, but it had no longer the quality of listlessness and hopelessness that it had had in the last days of Rome. Throughout the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, lawlessness was rampant, with the result that all thoughtful men worshipped law. Gradually, the vigor which lawlessness had permitted restored a measure of order and enabled a series of great men to build up a new civilization. From the 15th century to the present time, the power of the state as against the individual has been continually increasing, at first mainly as a result of the invention of gunpowder. Just as in the earlier days of anarchy, the most thoughtful men worshipped law, so during the period of increasing state power, there was a growing tendency to worship liberty. The 18th and 19th centuries had a remarkable degree of success in increasing state power to what was necessary for the preservation of order, and leaving, in spite of it, a great measure of freedom to those citizens who did not belong to the lowest social grades. The impulse towards liberty, however, seems now to have lost much of its force among reformers. It has been replaced by the love of equality, which has been largely stimulated by the rise to influence and affluence and power of new industrial magnates without any traditional claim to superiority. And the exigencies of total war have persuaded almost everybody that a much tighter social system is necessary than that which contented our grandfathers. There is over a large part of the earth's surface something not unlike a reversion to the ancient Egyptian system of divine kingship, controlled by a new priestly caste. Although this tendency has not gone so far in the West as it has in the East, it has nevertheless gone to lengths which would have astonished the 18th and 19th centuries, both in England and in America. Individual initiative is hemmed in either by the state or by powerful corporations, and there is a great danger lest this should produce, as in ancient Rome, a kind of listlessness and fatalism that is disastrous to vigorous life. I am constantly receiving letters saying, "I see that the world is in a bad state, but what can one humble person do? Life and property are at the mercy of a few individuals who have the decision as to peace or war. Economic activities on any large scale are determined by those who govern either the state or the large corporations. Even where there is nominally democracy, the part which one citizen can obtain in controlling policy is usually infinitesimal. Is it not perhaps better in such circumstances to forget public affairs and get as much enjoyment by the way as the times permit?" Such letters I find very difficult to answer, and I am sure that the state of mind which leads to their being written is very inimical to a healthy social life. As a result of mere size, government becomes increasingly remote from the governed, and tends, even in a democracy, to have an independent life of its own. I do not profess to know how to cure this evil completely, but I think it is important to recognize its existence and to search for ways of diminishing its magnitude. The instinctive mechanism of social cohesion, namely loyalty to a small tribe, whose members are all known to each other, is something very remote indeed from the kind of loyalty to a large state which has replaced it in the modern world. And even what remains of the more primitive kind of loyalty is likely to disappear in the new organization of the world that present dangers call for. An Englishman or a Scotsman can feel an instinctive loyalty to Britain. He may know what Shakespeare has to say about it. He knows that it is an island with boundaries that are wholly natural. He is aware of English history, insofar at least as it is glorious. And he knows that people on the continent speak foreign languages. But if loyalty to Britain is to be replaced by loyalty to Western Union, there will be need of a consciousness of Western culture as something with a unity transcending national boundaries. For apart from this, there is only one psychological motive which is adequate for the purpose, and that is the motive of fear of external enemies. But fear is a negative motive, and one which ceases to be operative in the moment of victory. When it is compared with the love of a Greek for his native city, it is obvious how very much smaller is the hold which fear has on the instincts and passions of ordinary men and women. Government, from the earliest times at which it has existed, has had two functions, one negative and one positive. Its negative function has been to prevent violence, to protect life and property, to enact criminal law and secure its enforcement. But in addition to this, it has had a positive purpose, namely to facilitate the realization of desires deemed to be common to the great majority of citizens. The positive functions of government at most times have been mainly confined to war. If an enemy could